This story that unfolded yesterday could not really tick more boxes about this ludicrous ecosystem of Tory party, so-called think tanks, really secretly funded lobby groups, and, of course, the right-wing media. I mean, even with your knowledge of this world, this story yesterday was a bit of a doozy, wasn't it?
Oh, it was a cracker. I think it just epitomizes that ecosystem, as you've called it, James, that exists between these Tufton Street think tanks. Well, they call themselves think tanks, and essentially they're lobby groups for free market ideas, low taxes, less regulation, less environmental standards, and how they spoon feed that to the media, which is then distributed throughout Westminster and the public at large. Yeah, it was a staggering story.
Because what they happened to spoon feed yesterday, and I think we're talking about a think tank called Civitas, which, if memory serves, was originally part of the Institute of Economic Affairs. Is that the one? And then it kind of hived off because even they realise that they can't all turn up from the same organisation every day on every other radio and television programme in the country without someone smelling a bit of a rat. So they're constantly setting up and regenerating new outfits. They shared some quotes, research end quotes, into net zero that the Times, the Daily Express, the Daily Mail, the Spectator and the Guido Fawkes hate site all regurgitated unquestioningly, but there were some fairly glaring errors in it, I gather.
Yeah, exactly. Spot on. So they claim that achieving net zero by 2050 will cost £4.5 trillion. So big, scary number, equivalent to £6,000 per household per year. So pretty hefty sum during a cost of living crisis. Except that the report confused electricity output, in particular for onshore wind, mistaking megawatts, which is the overall output, and megawatts per hour, grossly exaggerating the potential cost of building new onshore wind, which, of course, the Conservatives have blocked in recent times, and putting that cost at £860 billion, which is... Yeah,
you think at that point someone might... That's the point at which you tap your calculator, isn't it? And you think, really? Because that can't be right. Unless, of course, you're a kind of blinkered ideologue, in which case the bigger the number, the better the jackpot.
Well, this is the irony that Simon Evans, who's a brilliant environmental journalist at Carbon Brief, actually got a tip-off that this report was coming and did them the service of contacting them a couple of days ago, the author, to point out the error. And it wasn't changed prior to publication. They went through with it anyway. And it seems that the journalists and the editors who splashed these headlines didn't look into it any further either. And something that Simon Evans points out as well is that not only is this basic miscalculation present in the document, but it also just glaringly overlooks several other factors in the great green transition. So the declining cost of renewables, the cost of subsidizing fossil fuels currently, the jobs that may be created in the electric vehicles market. It's sort of a whitewash for a pro-fossil fuel industry. Well, and of course, as you allude to, I think it was the Office of Budgetary Responsibility that calculated not doing anything was going to cost a hell of a lot more than doing anything. So the conversation is skewed from the beginning. In layman's terms, then, if they stuck a figure of £4.5 trillion on this, what would the real figure, if they'd actually done the sums right, have been? Do we know? We don't exactly know. They've acknowledged the errors in the report.
Have the papers acknowledged it? Go on.
Specifically in this section, they've acknowledged the errors. They haven't acknowledged that overall it misleads on the issue of net zero. I believe the Times has put an update on its piece. I'm not sure about the others.
Okay.
But I mean, as you acknowledged, the Climate Change Committee that advises the government and the Office for Budget Responsibility say that the cost of net zero will either be negligible or will actually benefit us because we'll have coped with the adjustments that have to take place as the climate changes.
It makes for breathtaking reading, even for veterans of this swamp like you and me, claiming that moving to developing electric vehicles could cost 114,000 jobs, and then quoting a study that said, in the same body of work, quoting a study that said the electric car market could support 246,000 jobs by 2040. It's head wobble time, isn't it?
It's maddening. And that's the thing, as we know, James, they've turned their cannons on net zero in this instance, but they've been doing this for years on a hard Brexit, on taxes, essentially creating the body of thought behind Trussonomics that crashed the economy last year.
It is exactly the same people. Let's not make any bones about it. Exactly the same people and exactly the same secretly funded ideologies, so-called ideologies.
Yeah, exactly. And, they move on to a new policy area, every 6 months or so, but they still seem to be underpinned by the same illiterate science and economics that caused our problems this time last year. And yet there's only a handful of people like you and me, sadly, and a few other
it will catch on.
Calling this out.
It will catch on. Onwards, 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 onwards.